1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Who is the fool of Pride and Prejudice? Most readers have an answer ready before I finish my question. Mrs. Bennet, the embarrassing mother, the woman obsessed with marriage, the one who talks too much, worries too much, and humiliates Elizabeth every time she opens her mouth. Jane Austen encourages us to laugh at her. Elizabeth rolls her eyes at her. Mr. Bennet makes jokes about her. The narrator introduces her as a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. Case closed, right? Maybe not. Because the older I get, the less interested I become in the question, is Mrs. Bennet intelligent? And the more interested I become in another question, what if she's the only person who fully understands the crisis her family is living through? Not a secret genius, not a hidden mastermind, something much more interesting. A woman who sees reality more clearly than almost everyone around her. And once you notice that, it's very difficult to read this novel the same way again. Before I prove it, I have to deal with something, because Jane Austen herself calls Mrs. Bennet a woman of mean understanding. That's not a character insulting her, that's the narrator. So how do I agree she sees more clearly than everyone else? Here's how. Because Jane Austen is a satirist, and the joke isn't always on the person you think it's on. So stay with me. Hi, welcome to Ladies Lit Take episode number 6. Here's what almost every reader underestimates. The Bennet family is in genuine danger. When Mr. Bennet dies, Longbourn doesn't go to his wife. It doesn't go to his daughters. It goes to Mr. Collins, that ridiculous cousin. Mrs. Bennet has 5 daughters, no income of her own, and a husband who retreats to his library and jokes about death instead of doing something about it. In 1813, a woman without a husband or father had almost no options. Governess if lucky, destitution if unlucky. And here's the detail that changes everything. Everybody knows this. It's not a hidden threat. It hangs over the entire novel from the first chapter onward. Yet, look at how the family responds. Mr. Bennet reads in his library, Elizabeth makes witty remarks, Lydia flirts with soldiers, Mrs. Bennet panics. Readers treat her panic as evidence she's irrational. But panic isn't irrational when the danger is real. The strange thing isn't that Mr. Bennet worries. The strange thing is that so few other people do. Austen writes in chapter 1 that the business of her life was to get her daughters married. Listen to the word she chooses. Business, not hobby, not obsession, business. Because in economic terms, Mrs. Bennet is managing the only survival strategy available to her family, and she's the only person treating it with the urgency it deserves. Mrs. Bennet doesn't wait for events to happen. She creates opportunities. The moment Bingley arrives at Netherfield, she goes into action to secure an introduction. She engineers encounters. She sends Jane on horseback in questionable weather under circumstances that make an overnight stay more likely, extending the courtship window. Is that manipulative? Absolutely. But manipulation looks different when you're operating inside a system that gives you almost no formal power. Mrs. Bennet cannot inherit property. She cannot build a career. She cannot control the intel. What she can do is create social opportunities. So that is what she does, relentlessly, often awkwardly, sometimes foolishly. But she acts and it works. Jane gets Bingley. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens because Mrs. Bennet engineered the situation from the first chapter. Elizabeth calls her mother vulgar and scheming, but Elizabeth gets to be picky and romantic precisely because her mother already did the unglamorous work of putting eligible men in her path. Mrs. Bennet is the CEO of the family's survival. Elizabeth is the talent who gets to refuse the offers her mother line up. To understand Mrs. Bennet, we need to talk about Charlotte Lucas, because Charlotte quietly reveals something important. When Elizabeth refuses Mr. Collins, we side with her, because the novel teaches us to. But there's the uncomfortable truth. In terms of the Bennet family's survival, Elizabeth was taking a serious gamble. Mr. Collins was the one man who could have kept the Bennet family in their own home after Mr. Bennet's death. Mrs. Bennet saw that clearly, immediately, and she said so. Now I have to be honest. I won't claim Mrs. Bennet was playing a long game on Darcy. She initially dismisses him as proud and unpleasant. On Darcy, she was wrong. But on Collins, she was completely right. And here's the proof. Charlotte Lucas. Charlotte, Elizabeth's closest friend, the intelligent, sensible woman the novel clearly respects, does exactly what Mrs. Bennet would have wanted. She accepts Collins, not out of love, out of calculation. She says it plainly, I am not romantic. You know, I never was. I ask only a comfortable home. Austen presents this as a legitimate adult decision, rational, reasonable, and honest reading of reality. Mrs. Bennet has been saying the same thing, less elegantly, for the entire novel. The difference is presentation. Charlotte is calm, Mrs. Bennet is loud. Charlotte is dignified, Mrs. Bennet is embarrassing. So readers respect one and dismiss the other. But beneath the surface, both women understand the same reality. Romance is wonderful, security is necessary, and women in their society do not always have the luxury of choosing one without considering the other. Same logic, different packaging. Here is more uncomfortable thought. Maybe we've been laughing at the wrong parents. For years, readers have admired Mr. Bennet. He's witty, he's intelligent, he's funny. He sees through absurdity better than almost everyone else in the novel. But what does he actually do? He doesn't save money. He doesn't prepare his daughters for the future. He doesn't effectively supervise Lydia. He identifies problems brilliantly and then does almost nothing about them. Mrs. Bennet has the opposite flaw. She often misunderstands people. She lacks refinement. She makes social mistakes constantly, but she recognizes danger and tries to respond to it. The novel encourages us to laugh with Mr. Bennet. Adulthood sometimes teaches us to be a little frightened by him, because intelligence without responsibility is not necessarily wisdom. And responsibility is the thing Mrs. Bennet never escapes. She says in chapter 20 that nobody can tell what I suffer, but it is always so. Those who do not complain are never pitied. Austen frames this as comic, but read it again. It is also true. Mrs. Bennet has always been complaining loudly and publicly for years because silence hasn't worked. Mr. Bennet ignores her. Society ignores her. Her daughters roll their eyes. The only card she has left is volume. Yes, she is cringy, but cringe is a luxury that comes with security. Mrs. Bennet doesn't have security. She has 5 daughters and a ticking clock. But was Elizabeth wrong? Not exactly, and this is where I think many defenses of Mrs. Bennet go too far. Elizabeth is right to reject Mr. Collins. She refuses a marriage without affection or respect. The novel ultimately rewards her for that decision. Austen clearly values personal judgment. So, no, Elizabeth isn't wrong, but she is privileged in a way readers rarely acknowledge. Elizabeth gets to choose principle because the story eventually provides her with Darcy. Mrs. Bennet doesn't know Darcy is waiting in the final chapters. Mrs. Bennet is making decisions with the information she actually has. And given that information, her concerns are entirely reasonable. Elizabeth is morally right. Mrs. Bennet is economically right. The tension between these two truths is one of the novel's central conflicts. And the novel never fully resolves it. It just gives us a happy ending and hopes we don't look too closely at how it was built. Here's the thing about Jane Austen. She was a satirist, the best kind, the kind who hides the target. Austen makes fun of Mrs. Bennet's nerves, her exaggerations, her social gaffes, but Austen never says Mrs. Bennet is wrong about the danger. And in fact, every single one of Mrs. Bennet's fears come true. Lydia runs up with a man who has to be bribed into marrying her. Mr. Bennet is revealed to have saved almost nothing. Without Darcy's intervention, the family would have been genuinely ruined. Mrs. Bennet was Cassandra, the prophet no one believed, not a clown. The narrator called her a woman of mean understanding, but what Austen actually shows you is a woman who correctly identifies the threat, correctly identifies the opportunity, correctly maneuvers her family into a position where Jane can marry well, and correctly panics every time her daughters make decisions that ignore their financial reality. What she lacks is elegance, not perception, and these are not the same thing. So no, honestly, I'm not going to tell you Mrs. Bennet is secretly the smartest character in Pride and Prejudice. That's not the right claim, and it's not one I can fully earn. Here's the claim I can earn. Mrs. Bennet is the one character who never stops looking at the novel's central problem. Everyone around her, her husband, her daughters, the narrator, the reader, even us, we find ways to look away. She doesn't get the luxury, she sees the danger, she names it constantly, and she does the only things available to her to address it. The people around her mistake her dignity for wisdom, refinement for insight, good manners for good judgment, and we do the same. The ending, two daughters married well, the family saved, is largely her work. She built it. Nobody gives her the credit, and that, more than anything else, is what makes her one of the most revealing characters Austen ever wrote. Whew, I'm done. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you like hot takes that defend the characters everyone dismiss it, hit subscribe right now. In the comments, tell me, defense one character that everyone hates but you think is secretly right. And from any book, I'll read the best ones and maybe make a video about them. And for the next week, you tell me, what do you want me to make a video about? Do you want me to make a video about Mr. Collins and argue that whether he's actually a decent guy? Let's see. See you then. Bye!